Hi, and welcome back to Continual. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight we're going to be taking a look at the grand train wreck that is social media in 2023. But before we start diving down this path of toxicity, let's find out who all has come to help share their opinions on this subject. Mrs. Carr, you're up first.
Well, it seem fitting that we start with a train wreck. Hi, I am R.E. Carr, occasionally known as Rachel, but because the original Rachel Carr wrote vegan cookbooks first, I'm under my initials. I write urban fantasy. You can find me at racheleccarr.com, and I have boobs and opinions. It says so in my social media bio.
James.
I'm Jane Gates. I spent a little over a decade as a professional publicist and public relations manager in both science fiction and fantasy and social media and tabletop gaming. It's been a very long week already, so my brain is apparently not quite on schedule. But I was also one of the people who was deeply involved early on with getting Twitter kind of shaped into what it was for a long time for the writing community, as well as the use of Facebook, Reddit, and a lot of other things. So this is a subject in which I am both experienced and frustrated.
Rick?
Hey, my name is Rick Gualtieri. I'm a multi-genre author of over 30 books, although primarily in horror and horror comedy. I'm across as many social medias as I can handle without my brain exploding, and I am extremely unhappy to say that after 12 years of doing this, most of it on social media, I have never once freaking gone viral.
I'm sure we can arrange that.
I doubt it highly.
Jessica.
I'm Jessica Nettles. I am a historical fantasy author and a Southern horror author. I've been swimming around social media for about 25 years. Still don't know what the hell I'm doing. Still learning, because every time I think I understand it, something new comes along and I'm like, what's that? And go try that. So I'm still learning this, but still fascinated by it, and still every time something new comes along, something weird happens. So I'm there for it, right? So, yeah.
And speaking of something weird, here for it, Mr. Reckward.
Oh, thanks, Jim. Hi, everyone. I'm Jay Reckward. I'm an author of epic fantasy, sword and sorcery, and urban fantasy. I'm also the host of Pondering the Orb on YouTube, which is a show that explores books, music, and more. I'm also the host of another YouTube show where No Blubs has gone before, Star Trek The Next Generation podcast. And in my life, as I work as a freelance digital creator and sometimes consultant on stuff like marketing and social media. So, yeah, I have opinions too, I guess.
So let's kind of dive into, historically, everybody has a little bit of a different experience in terms of social media. And there's very much a difference between I'm doing social media for me personally, and I am doing social media as a part of my creative business, trying to help publicize myself, marketing, all the rest of that good stuff. And all of us have a fairly long history in dealing with this. I've done it for clients. I occasionally do it for myself. I do a lot of strategy work in the space, and I also spend a lot of time talking about the privacy aspects of dealing with social media, the good and the bad. So, Rachel, why don't we start with you on this one a little bit? Why don't you talk a little bit about how your approach came about for social media? Kind of what are the things you've been, taught? What are the things that have worked for you, and kind of how have you been operating with your platform?
You mean as a paranoid neurodivergent introvert? How have I handled this?
Yes.
Yeah, my introduction to social media was a split personality. There was R.E. Carr and there was Rachel Carr. Rachel Carr posts a lot of recipes and cat photos as the cat comes to say hello. And R.E. Carr just posts a lot of recipes and cat photos and then occasionally talks about books. Like most of the authors I know, I did start with Facebook because I was using it as part of the Kindle Scout campaign to try to get people to vote for my books. I was dragged kicking and screaming onto Twitter. I do Instagram, cats and bread. I am the bread slut there. And I've even done the TikTok because I was told that sold books. And boy, it does sell books, but I kind of hate it too. So a lot of it is just, never say anything online that you don't want repeated 10 years later. That's a very big thing because the internet is forever, no matter what they say. And try your best. I found that I initially tried to listen to experts, and while there's some very good advice, and I did build up from that about consistency and all that, I quickly learned that as a sort of quirky individual, I had much better success when I stopped trying to be what other people said I should be as an author and was just sort of, me. And did I mention lots of cats and food, because that just gets interactions more so than books. But occasionally the people, they look at the cat and then they buy the book. So I've sort of meshed them by putting the cats sleeping next to stacks of my novels. Very, very pro tip right there.
Yeah, because the cats and the dogs will get you more views than the books themselves.
Correct.
Every time.
Although in TikTok, that's the one where it's a little different because the algorithm is like an almighty beast that must be trained with only very specific treats. And when we go, I'm sure we're going to specifically dive into that evil empire. And when we do, I can talk about how that one is distinctly different than all the other social media. All the other social media, you need to be your genuine curated best self. And on TikTok, you have to be the bitch of the algorithm. Let's be real.
James, how about you?
So I kind of got into it just because I am relentlessly curious about new things. A lot of that comes from my grandfather, who is a civil engineer who worked on some of the first computers at Stanford and just always imbued that sense of what's next. I want to know about it. I want to, experience it. So I just waded happily into Twitter and promptly discovered a thing that worked really well for me. And then other people discovered that I really liked Twitter and was good at it and started asking me for advice. And it snowballed from there. And, it's been a very bumpy ride since then. The interesting thing for me, one of the biggest lessons I learned with social media, and this is specifically, I think, triggered by Rachel's comment about being your curated best self for social media. When I started in social media, I very much had that sort of approach of like, I have to present a specific image. And it's been really interesting to kind of track how my social media has evolved over the years, because a few years ago, I ran out of, trying to please people and trying to be the perfect person and started talking about, my neurodivergence, my mental health issues, dealing with PTSD and all of these other things, the stuff that I was dealing with having worked in the industry for 10 years as a femme presenting queer person. And it was really interesting because I love looking back at Facebook memories, which, 8 years ago, I'd get like 10 likes on something. And now I've got this very different sort of pattern. And for me, actually being exceptionally not my best self on social media has been a big part of it, while still having to have that balance of making sure that I'm still being kind, I'm still being honest about it. So that's kind of been my social media journey, of like starting out having to be really careful and conscious of not showing any weakness, to now making sure that I'm doing it in a way that's helpful to other people. And it's just been a huge shift across my years in the spaces.
Rick?
All right. So before getting into writing, I came from an e-commerce background. So, I understand technology. I like technology, but I don't trust technology. So, I go into a lot of these things like, from at least a security standpoint, relatively paranoid standpoint. But despite being an introvert, I also have a little bit of a theater background from college. So the social media is kind of my way of doing a little bit of performing. That all said, author Rick is pretty much the same guy as regular Rick. So there's really not too much difference there. I do segregate my social media a bit, and I tell my readers, like, hey, if you just want to see book updates, go here. If you want to actually see my political rants, go here, so they know what to expect. As far as like being my best self on there, well, never really had to like. I'll be perfect. I never really had to worry too much about that. On the one hand, writing raunchy comedy, that definitely gives you some plot armor because it's kind of expected of the brand. And I'll be perfectly honest, I have that mediocre white male armor. Yes, that is a thing. Because I mean, I've jumped into like online brawls before where like, some of my female, like, author friends have been getting savaged by like, like jerks, and immediately like jumping in there, the attitude changes. So, I guess I'm able to be a little more aggressive in that regards. And no, it is definitely not fair and not cool that that happened. So just want to acknowledge that. But yeah, I've been, it's a constant evolution for me. I'm like Rachel. I like, every so often I listen to the experts, I try what they say, it does not work, and then I wind up going back to doing my own thing, which doesn't necessarily, once again, get me to go viral, but it tends to work better than what everybody else is telling me to do. So,
Jess?
Okay, so I started out in social media just kind of doing just things for myself. So it wasn't to promote anything for a long time. It was just me being out there. And I mean, I've watched myself evolve too, and I can be honest, I didn't come out of the box curating my best self. I'm pretty straightforward, and I'm also an introvert, but social media allowed me to be kind of a louder version of myself at a time when I wasn't comfortable being that loud person that a lot of I am now. I had to grow into that, and it helped me. And then I got to a point where I was looking at myself online going, I don't want to be that person anymore. But I mean, I still speak my mind online. I still do a lot of that thing, but I think I'm a better person now than I was when I first started. I would like to think so. And now with the writing career and everything launching, I write a lot more about my writing. I also share a lot of cat pictures. I'm on Facebook where I started out. And then I got on Twitter probably about 2011 or 12. I'm not crazy about Twitter. I have a love-hate relationship with it. Sometimes I'm on there and I do lots of fun things. And then sometimes I get tired of it and just walk away because it's just too much information too fast for me. And I'm on Instagram and I share a lot of photographs of my cats and cooking and my crafting, which is, crochet and knitting, that kind of thing, because that's what makes me happy. And that seems to be what my audience likes. And they like my books and they like my writing, and I share my writing number, how many words have I done today? What am I working on? And that's good. And that seems to draw people's interest more than anything else is, cat pictures, my crafts, and what am I working on with my writing, and that's kind of where I'm at. I'm dabbling around a little bit with things like Mastodon now, because there was the whole thing, with Twitter, and I know we'll talk about that in a little bit. And I'm really, really thinking that I want to get away from Twitter for a lot of reasons. And I've thought that for years. And every time I think I'm going to get away, I end up staying. So we shall see.
Okay.
So I really am going to be the weird person here tonight. I started off with MySpace in high school, so social media for me has kind of been a constant during my late teenage all the way up to now, especially being, a professional author and working in a bunch of other digital spaces. I think when I got my first book publishing contract, that's the reason I got on Twitter. Jane was there for the first book I ever had, so like that was 2009-ish, something, 2010-ish.
Hey now.
Yeah. So sorry. What?
2019, you said 19, right?
Right? Yeah.
Right.
Don't go aging people like this.
Right. Sorry. Anyway.
Jay, you look really good for 22.
Thank you. I look great.
100.
Uh, yeah, thank you. I look fantastic. Honestly, when it comes to like finding your best self online, when you've kind of grown up with social media constantly being there every day, and then at some point we all got smartphones and social media fused to our hands. I have not been my best self on social media. Everyone here has seen that. I have also been my best self on social media. So like who you are and who you aren't on social media, I think is a weird thing to talk about. It gets into a lot of theory that I'm not sure applies in everyday life. But at the current moment, I have reached a point in just life in general, and that part of this is like having a kid and like wanting to take my career much more seriously, where I'm much more focused in terms of how I use my social media. Like I use it to promote my YouTube shows. I use it to promote the books. I use it to talk about my kids and the things I'm into. Like I'm going to start talking about brewing again because I finally have time to start brewing. Stuff like that. And mostly I've just gotten to the point where I hate smartphones and I hate being on a screen all the time, including for work. And understand, I love writing. I love writing every day. I love putting the words down. But being on a screen has become a real kind of chore psychologically for me. So I try to get away from it as much as I can, especially Facebook. Right now I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Mastodon, Instagram, and I count YouTube as a social media platform. And I don't judge anyone who's on TikTok. So let me preface that with this, but I have been shown that like use of TikTok, you're giving your data to the Chinese Communist Party. There's just no way of getting around that. And what they use that data for is some very dangerous, unethical, and inhumane things. And again, I don't judge anyone, but I just can't do it. At some point, my ethics and morals hit me in the face a couple years ago, and it just became one of those things where like, fuck, man, there's only so much you can put up with in the world, and there's only so much you can be complacent with, and
I stole Rachel's.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. So, Rachel, I'm so sorry. Please give her 2.
No, it's okay.
But
you needed it.
Social media is just such a weird thing psychologically to talk about, and I think like when we talk about it, psychology really gets into it. But I've said enough.
Well,
believe me, I could talk for hours about the massive imposter complex I have and the total mask I wear on social media. Like, we can go there if you want to.
Yeah, and we'll get there, I think, because there's a couple things. I mean, because again, because I'm the old decrepit one, I did start on BBSs with dial-up, where you had to get the handshake and you were looking at the black and white screen and in text and conversations. And I remember
you were
looking
doing
at
that Mission Impossible stuff.
This message can be self-destructed in a few seconds, Jay. I have that power here. Remember that. But looking at the way both the technology has changed and shifted, but also the way that as a platform it's grown. So a couple of things I want to dive into. The first idea I want to go into, though, is we're seeing now a definitive split in social media between social media and entertainment media, where we've got things that are designed to create social engagement, create community, create actual communication and chat back and forth. And the other side are the platforms that are designed much more for a passive entertainment. It's almost let's replace sitting and streaming with sitting and streaming straight off the social media. Whether this is TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, things like this, even though you still have the social aspect to them, the platforms are not designed in the same way, nor are they designed to create the same kinds of relationships between people. So, James, I'm going to hit you up with this one first. As you're looking at these changes, especially in consideration for authors and creators, and I think the answer to most of these things is going to be a big it depends. What do you see now, currently, about how people are using both the social media aspects and the entertainment media aspects in building platform, promotion, all the rest of that?
So there's this thing that's developed over the last few years, and Mary Robinette Kowal does a really good job of explaining this, but basically talking about the fact that as creators, we are mini celebrities. And I think that that has, with the rise of video content, become more, true than ever. Another really good person to look at for some of this is Natanya Barron. She's been doing some really in-depth pieces about how she has been adapting her social media presence since, the Twitter debacle and everything else that's going on, and how she's created a pretty solid video, especially TikTok following. So you can definitely do it. What I think we have a problem with, is the creative community in general is going, there is a single way that we can do this that will be successful, and we must all do it that exact way. I have actually gotten in pretty heated arguments on panels in the past with agents who are like, well, you need to have this specific platform. And it's like, okay, cool. That's great if you are doing this specific sort of writing, you have this specific idea for your career. But especially now, I mean, we're suffering a little more in that we don't really have the medium publishers anymore. That's a fairly wide open area, but there are a lot of small to small medium publishers. There's self-publishing, there are author consortiums. There are so many different paths that you can take that it really comes down to, as you said, it depends. A big part of it is that if you really hate doing something, unless you make that part of your shtick, it's going to come through. Like, there are so many people that I worked with who hated every moment of the social media content that they were creating, and it really showed. Like, you're stilted, you're forced, you're not entertaining, you're not engaging. Any pushback really just kind of breaks the ground out from under you. So a big part of it is finding something that you enjoy doing in some way. And if that's posting videos of your kids and your cats and talking about them, and then occasionally being like, oh, hey, I also write books, that's great. If you have the link to your books in your profile and you occasionally call back to it, that's awesome. If that's being on Twitter and having discussions with people and being involved in emerging topics or in, Goodreads book chats, there's so many options, and you can't create success without a lot of luck. And it doesn't really matter, unfortunately, in a lot of ways, what you do. A significant part of hitting that breakout bestseller is going to be luck. So yes, you can throw yourself at all the walls, or you can pick a couple of walls and really just, hone those in. Another person that I really recommend following is Mallory Cooper. She has talked extensively about her journey with creating viral video content and creating a really solid following. She also does book marketing. And so she's really good at just taking some niche things, in her case, latex cat suits and gardening, and turning them into book sales. I could never do that. That is not my thing. So it's very much, who are you? What are you doing? What gets you going in the morning? What are you excited about? And using that to create that image, that persona for yourself, and then finding the right platform for that outlet.
So how about you, Rick?
I really resisted because there's kind of like that divide between text social media, which is typically your Facebook and your Twitter, and video social media, which is your YouTubes, TikToks, and probably more Instagram these days. And I resisted that because it's not that I don't like making videos. I've always sucked at editing videos. But, and I mean, it gets back to what Jane was saying about, like, if you don't enjoy it, it'll come through. That said, I think you can kind of learn it, because that's what I've been kind of doing with TikTok. I've been forcing myself. It's been forcing me to up my skill set and get better at something I've traditionally not been good at. And the more I do that, the more comfortable I get. And the more comfortable I get, I think the much more fun I'm having with it. I do agree with Jay on security concerns with TikTok. Well aware of those. At the same time, I also look and say, okay, who do I trust less, TikTok or Mark Zuckerberg? Might be a toss up, but yeah, that's been kind of like my thing. But at the same time, I do limit myself. There's only so much time during the day, and I know that I can hit social media overload very easily. So I kind of usually limit myself to 3 that I kind of focus on. Right now that's Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. I have presence on a lot of others. I've somehow grown like 1,000 followers on Instagram pretty much by doing nothing there. Still not sure how that happened. But those are also the ones that I'm focused on, but also the ones I kind of enjoy the most, even though each of them has things that drive me nuts, and I think are counterintuitive to the whole social concept. But I mean, for me, once again, as a comedy writer, the difference between me personally versus me trying to be entertaining is not that much. I would say probably on TikTok, my focus tends to shift between one of 2 things: either trying to be funny and having a good time with that, or or getting on a soapbox and talking about ethics in the author world, which is something I tend to be passionate / little preachy about. So, that's just kind of my thing. I try to be myself. I try to have fun, and I try not to overdo it.
Jess?
I'm like Rick. I get overwhelmed real easily by all of it. So I really focus more on the written stuff and just focus on Instagram. I've not tried TikTok yet. And part of that is not that I don't have skill with video, because the past 3 years have taught me how to be good with video because of my job as a teacher. You make videos for your students, but I spend so much time as it is on the screen. Adding more social media to try to juggle and manage is just overwhelming. So I really don't focus on I don't think I focus much on the entertainment side of the social media as much as just engaging with people, which is really what I want to do. Probably the closest I come is Instagram, and that's just taking pictures of things that I find interesting or amusing, and being funny in that way, because I do find things amusing and want other people to laugh too, or things that are just interesting. And I kind of go at it that way. And apparently a lot of people on Instagram like that, because I do have a lot of followers. I'm surprised about that too. I don't know why people find my cats so fascinating, but they do. And so I'm okay with that. Yeah, they're cats. Or they find other things that I take pictures of interesting, and I'm like, well, okay, other people like this too. So yay. And if it promotes my books too, hooray, so I'm probably not as focused as I probably could be about it, but and doing TikTok is something that I've thought about doing for 2023, but I'm still a little nervous about it, and I don't know if I have the bandwidth for it. So yeah.
Jay?
So my primary focus right now are my 2 YouTube shows, which are Pondering the Orb. That's the orb right there, Leonard. And my other show, which I do with my dad, Where No Bubs Has Gone Before, which reviews Star Trek: The Next Generation. That has really become kind of my main focus in terms of really honing my skills at crafting video content. So I spend a lot of my time there now. I have a personal Facebook page where I used to do a lot of political posting, but then I actually started working with people who were working in that space, and they were like, hey, don't do that. So I stopped doing that. I kind of use my personal Facebook for just, talking about things I'm fans of. I come from the Church of John Hartness, and John Hartness sat me down about 2 years ago, and he's like, hey, you actually move some books when you post about your books consistently. So I post at least 3 to 4 times a week on Twitter twice on my professional Facebook page. I always post something about my show, Pondering the Orb, on Instagram. I'm actually using Mastodon right now for kind of like more of a diary than anything. I'm not going into it trying to like gain an audience or find a space or find friends or any of that. I just kind of want a place to share private internet thoughts, which is kind of geeky and dumb, but whatever. Really my main place in terms of writing in my professional author career right now is Twitter, because John Hartness ended up being right. If you keep posting those book links every week, like, people will respond to those and they'll start sharing them and they'll start clicking them. And I've actually started to have a rapport and grow a little bit of a fan base that I talk to on a regular basis. So that's been kind of cool. So, that's really kind of how I'm using it. I think with the nature of Mastodon, it's very hard to monetize, so I'm not trying to really monetize Mastodon. I'm trying to get to the monetization goals with YouTube, of course, which, is a hill to get up on. Sorry, I almost used another F-bomb. I'm so sorry, Rachel. But, I just kind of take it year by year, day by day, month by month, or whatever. I just screwed up that ordering, but yeah, that's it.
Rachel?
Well said. I'm often a bit of a unicorn. Like, no one believes it when I say it, but like I am not a very comfortable on social media person. In fact, a lot of the ways I get through social media is I have my crutches. One of them happens to be on this panel tonight. I actually am a moderator in the group run by Rick Walteri, because while I'm not comfortable like running it and doing it, I can be very good sort of sitting back, and I offer lots of hugs to people and punish people for puns, that kind of thing. I learned that if you're not comfortable completely on social media, use little masks and tools. One thing I do is I actually share the same photo of Jeff Goldblum every single day. I have done this now, I looked, for 7 years.
Oftentimes that's like the best part of my day. I thank you very much for posting that picture.
Thank you. But people go, like, someone asked me, why? What purpose does sharing the same photo of Jeff Goldblum every day? But it's a way of like, it's like how Chuck Tingle always has the bag on his head. I have my little photo of Jeff, and I can share a thought. Sometimes it's sweet, sometimes it's serious, but every day I'm there, and anyone who knows me will see the same photo of Jeff Goldblum. And that's actually how I've gained people and driven others crazy. But I figure if you can't handle the fact that I'm quirky, is that the word we use now? That it's there. And like on Twitter, I made a promise that because Twitter can be a dumpster fire, every day I'm going to post something positive. I don't care so much about promoting my books. I'm just going to say one thing that encourages someone or makes them feel seen or does one thing every single day. And that's the patterns I use to keep from giving up on social media, because otherwise I would just, as soon as I can, I'm like the cat that's going to run under the bed, since we've talked about cats a lot tonight. The entertainment part can be very exhausting, particularly if you're an introvert, Lord knows I am actually shy. And the best thing I can say is on those type of platforms, if it hurts you and drains you to do it constantly, kind of break it up or do little breaks. I do spurts of stuff. And the social part, I'm an empath, so it gets exhausting very quickly. So the social part is difficult. The entertainment part is difficult. I don't know if I'm adding much to this conversation, but I'm just saying that you don't have to necessarily, make yourself suffer to get an audience. If you just, like James has said, find things that you do enjoy and really like give yourself gusto and enjoy it thoroughly. And if you're enjoying it, like now I have friggin' Juliet Landau follows me on Twitter because I post something nice every day. So that's a bucket list item ticked. You don't have to necessarily just always be out. But as the Church of Hartness says, it doesn't hurt to remind people every once in a while that you do sell books and how to get them.
Every 15
Hallelujah.
minutes.
Preach.
Well, and we've kind of already started mentioning and talking a little bit about Mastodon. Because as a platform, Mastodon's been around for a while. I've had a Mastodon account for a while, primarily because of the open source community, because it is a distributed tool. And one of the things that I think that we're going to see a lot more of that gets interesting is going to be the battle between the centralized big players, the Facebooks, Meta, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, we're these bigger players, but also these more niche places where we're able to create community. We've seen large communities, do this in Reddit, where they're able to create very strong self-policing communities. Well, these distributed tools like Mastodon are going to put a lot more tools in people's hands to build those communities. But the big question is, are they really viable to get people there and find them? And how are you pulling people over there? So, Rick, any thoughts?
All right. So I tried Mastodon. I did not really like it. So I have an account there, but I probably won't be using it too much. That said, I'm a pretty big fan of Discord.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like, the concept of building Discord communities and such. I know a lot of authors kind of attach theirs to their Patreon. Hey, get exclusive access to me. I already have a Facebook group, as Rachel mentioned, and I spent enough time there, so I didn't connect my Discord to my Patreon because I was like, nobody's paying for me on Facebook. They're not going to pay for me on Discord. But I will say from Discord and from the Facebook group, yes, growing that sense of community is really a wonderful thing. And in that itself, the community by itself can grow, because I've had people who've joined Team TW, not just, I don't know how far I can say that word, but I've had people join that group just because people said, hey, we have so much fun here, come join. And they've never read my books, which every so often I post, I'm like, hey, just a reminder, if you haven't read Rick's books here, it's perfectly cool, but it wouldn't hurt. But, and as a result, we have yearly traditions there that people look forward to. We do a Secret Santa. We help with some of the needier members every year. We do a lot of things there. And some people have pretty much told me that this group is the only reason they stay on Facebook. So I think it's kind of an important thing. That said, communities do tend to one, you do need rules in a community. And and two, sometimes you need to police those rules. The only downside is sometimes that you don't. It's hard to make a community public because there's so many garbage players on social media. You get spammers, you get all these things that you have to lock it down. And as a result of locking it down, it does make it more difficult to grow. You have to get the message out there, a little more aggressively.
Jess?
I've experimented a little bit with Mastodon. I think I opened my account in November, and I've not had a lot of growth, but I've had friends who have. And so, I'm still kind of trying to figure out how to navigate it. I think some of these smaller communities are going to be the way to go, maybe in the future, as the larger Metas and Twitters do become a little bit even more crazy than they are now for whatever reason. I just don't know how they're going to work, but I do think that I think they can become viable. Just like they were in the early days before we had these bigger programs. And I would like to see that happen, just because I remember, I do kind of remember before Facebook, the things that were available, and it was interesting times, and people did connect, and there were some good things going on. And we have the tools now that we didn't have, pre-Facebook, to make those connections stronger and to make those to make communities that maybe we didn't before.
Jay?
So I've committed myself to using Mastodon 3 times a week. Like I really kind of structure and schedule my life around to make just this stuff easier. Because someone mentioned it earlier, the mindset that you bring into social media really determines the success you're going to have on it and your longevity on it and how long you can actually exist on it on a daily basis. So like I said previously, I kind of use it as more of a personal diary right now. I'm at jrequard at Indie Web Social. I think that's it. Yeah. I see 3 problems right now with Mastodon as it is. The first one is that discoverability is really hard on it still in its current state. I think the second thing is that for all of the kind of features that it has, people aren't really, depending on the server that you join in the community that's hosted on that server, you're going to have very different kind of tractions in terms of what you want to do there. Like on IndieWeb, they really talk about, distributed services. They really talk about trying to make IndieWeb better. I joined an interesting community where they're not necessarily interested in books. They're actually interested in trying to make Mastodon a better place. So those conversations are interesting to be a part of. The third problem, though, I see with Mastodon, and this is the problem that happens every day that I'm on there, people on Mastodon, and I like the platform, and I like the people on the platform, but they're really there to shit on the other social media platforms. Oh, Twitter's falling apart. Oh, Facebook's falling apart. Oh, TikTok's falling apart. Well, everything's falling apart. And it kind of becomes just this echo chamber for itself. So I think there's a lot of positives with Mastodon, and I think it has a lot of potential. But it really needs to get a larger fan base, and I actually think that it really needs to fix its discoverability issue. And once it does that, it really has some, I think, traction in terms of getting a real wider audience. But for right now, I think people that move there are satisfied. I'm satisfied. But I think if you move there and you didn't immediately find something to do there, it quickly faded away. It just became another like text-based application that you use for social media to post shit. It's just another thing.
Rachel?
Yeah, I was thinking about what you said, and it brought back the what is the internet term for entropy, which is enshittification of all social media platforms at a certain point reach a critical mass, and then they start to break down, and that is enshittification.
Great term.
Thank you. I didn't make it up, but I have totally adopted it. But the way that I found with the decentralized is they are a little rough on people with ADHD, because it's like, wait, what server am I supposed to be on? Discord is I usually need like some sort of medication to handle Discord, but I do it if it's a small community, and it's like if you know people and you can have conversations. A lot of these decentralized are kind of like high school all over again. If you're stuck with a group of people you don't know and you don't know what to do, you're just going to sit in the corner and pick up a book, preferably one of mine. But if you find a community, like it's wonderful when you can get in and discuss something and it's fun. Like we were talking about apples on Hive or on a Discord. I go on a Discord server and I watch my friends play Guild Wars 2. I don't play Guild Wars 2, but I watch them play it because I can talk to them, and usually I tell them what to make for dinner. So it's all about just finding a place, and especially if you're shy or you don't have a helping hand to lead you in, it can be very daunting. And that's what the only advantage I find of the big networks is, at least if you, especially something like Twitter, if you throw something out there, anyone can see it. They might not, but they can. And that can help, particularly when you have trouble breaking the ice and that sort of thing.
Jane?
So I've tried Mastodon multiple times, and it definitely is an ADHD nightmare. But my biggest issue with it, I think, is like I use Discord a lot. I want to say I love it, but I'm very familiar with it, especially because I helped run Worldcon on it in 2020 when everything, initially fell apart. But for me, the issue with Mastodon is that it feels incomplete, I think is where it really comes from. Because with Discord, generally I am going in with a group of people that I know, and there's more of that. It's kind of like in the earlier days, when the internet was really just starting to hit that explosive point where you had chat rooms with people that you knew based on a shared interest. And there was a little bit of structure around it and control. Mastodon to me has that sort of siloed feel without the ability to control who I'm around. And this is actually one of my big issues with Twitter as well, is that there's no way to really know who's in there with you or understand where the groups are that have the people that you know. And it is extremely reliant on the person who put it together, which is also a Discord issue. There was, when I tried Mastodon again a couple of months ago, there was this one instance which I'm not going to name, but it had been highly recommended to me. I'm like, cool, I'm going to go get involved in this. And literally within days of it, the founder of it, the people started complaining about them and that they were having some serious issues. I believe that in this case, it was they had made some extremely racist remarks. And so that instance kind of collapsed. And that to me is very frustrating because I like to build spaces. And the Discords that I'm in are very controlled spaces with very specific groups of friends. And so I understand that. I know how to navigate that space. But Discord feels kind of like walking into Mastodon feels like walking into a big room where I don't know anyone. I could run into anyone. And I've been in this industry for a while, and I mean, my fellow panelists kind of know that I'm not shy about my opinions. There are a lot of people that don't like me, and some of them it's justified. But there are also a lot of people that it's not safe for me to be in that room with. And if I don't know if they're there and I don't have any way to manage that, and that's a significantly larger issue for people who are more marginalized than I am. There have been a lot of discussions that I've seen specifically from Black women talking about the lack of safety in Mastodon and the amount of racism that they've run into, coupled with basically a complete lack of any tools to moderate or protect themselves from that because it is so decentralized. So for me, Mastodon has a long way to go before it can even remotely claim to take the place of any of the big social media networks. And I know that it works really well for a lot of people, but it is a very specific tool that a lot of us have been trying to cram around the need that we have because we're trying to get away from Facebook or Twitter, and it's not those things. But there's not really anything else to replace those either. So I'm on Mastodon, but I don't use it. I don't have a sense of connection with it, and I've tried multiple times and I just keep bouncing off of it.
Yeah, Jay, go ahead.
Jay, may I ask you a question? Do you think that it is a question of replacing things like Twitter or Instagram in terms of Mastodon, or do you think that like social media platforms now are we moving to the age where you just have to struggle to make space?
Oh boy. So I am going to briefly go off into a small rant about social media. Twitter was one of the most powerful tools that we have had for social engagement and working together and activism in any sense. I was heavily involved in the 2020 protests, and we were able to have so much critical mass around those, in large part because of Twitter, but also in a very real moment-to-moment safety. Twitter was how I kept my people alive. There needs to be a centralized social media network. There has to be. There has to be something where everyone can reach everyone else, because a big part of what Twitter was so good for was that you could run into people you would never have met in 1,000 years in something like Mastodon, real life, or even Facebook. So we need that centralized social media thing. And it is hard to make your own space, but it always has been. I mean, the issue now is that we have too many tools and we're running into a fracturing, whereas before we didn't have enough tools. And if you burned one thing out, you're kind of in trouble now. But while it is hard to make space, there are so many more places that you can make your space that I don't think that that's as much of an issue as the fact that there's no good centralized place where everyone can kind of have a foothold and then break off from there into their preferred sub social medias, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and actually, that kind of goes. I was going to hold on to this, but I'll go ahead and open this door. I may as well start the fight because it's that time. And Jess, you're going to be up to give your opinion first on this. But
Fight.
when we look at how social media is changing and a lot of the things that have become public now, we have a lot of discourse about platforms. I'm getting ready to do another piece on Section 230, which is what we use in the US that basically allows for social media to exist the way it does in terms of basically holding platforms harmless for what's posted on them. And as we've seen now, there's a lot of question and there's a lot of potential legality coming through about, because the US federal government and other countries were given portals into the back end of Meta and into the back end of Twitter and into a number of other platforms. Is that now a First Amendment argument? And so this is the first thing. And we see both sides, both political parties are arguing to eliminate Section 230, which potentially creates a massive problem for social media across the board. So I guess to sort of open this question, in the age of where we're talking about safety on social media, because that is a relative term, we can either create communities where you are responsible for what happens in them, or you're out in the wilderness. And I mean, there's gradations in there. We're looking at a lot of AI tools coming online to enforce what is and is not allowed to be said on these platforms. And we're going to see a lot more restriction on these different platforms coming down the line, depending on what comes out of, again, changes of Section 230, what's happening in California, what's happening in New York, and what we see coming out of the EU and Britain, all of which are arguing about what can and can't and what should or should not be allowed to happen on social media. For example, to affect authors, we know, and it's long-standing been that Facebook would not let you run an ad for romance if it showed two men or two male nipples. Now, if there's a nipple showing, pretty much you're not going to see anything. So we're seeing a great deal more restriction around visual imagery, around content, around all of these sorts of things. And art, creativity, writing is designed to be commentary on the times and society we're in. So as we look at everybody wanting to enforce more and more restrictions on speech, on content, on what you can and can't say on these platforms, what do you think that that's going to do to us as authors, to creators, and for people trying to make contact with us? So, Jess, not that that's a complicated question at all.
Oh gosh. I think it's going to make it more difficult for us. I mean, we see this already where we're struggling to decide what to put up and what to say about certain things. And can we say this, or are we going to get put in Facebook jail? And, we've had many friends put in Facebook jail for the things that we can say or not say. We even have this discussion here with certain words. And I can see that escalating, and that's going to make it difficult, especially for certain genres, which I have a real hard time with this because I don't believe in censorship, but I also believe that there should be protection for people as well. And that makes it very difficult for me to try to decide what I need to think about what the government is wanting to do with social media. Does that make sense? As far as being an author, I don't think that what we're trying to sell should be censored. Because I don't feel like we're hurting anybody putting a man's nipple, a bare chest man on a cover. What the hell? So I think there has to be some thought, and I think if we're trusting AI to do that policing, I think that's foolishness. Because it's losing the human element that we need to make those kind of judgments. Who's behind all of that, I guess, is the bigger question. Who's going to be behind all of those judgments?
All right, Jay, I know it's coming.
So I have two ways of looking at this. As an author, the one thing that I try to tell people about social media, and I have like a little writing group here in New York of people that I've just kind of gathered to try to make them write. Yeah, right, you simpletons. The thing that I try to tell them is that it doesn't matter what you do on social media. It doesn't matter what kind of presence you build up. Unless you have a book, like, none of this matters. You can say you're a writer, you can say you're an author, but you need to actually, like, focus your time on actually creating the thing that you're supposed to be creating. Otherwise, you're going to get trapped in kind of what I call the ego hole that is social media. From a social media user perspective, I think that as other platforms kind of crack down on moderation and in terms of what language and content can be presented and used, other places are going to pop up to provide platforms where people are going to be able to be, out in the Wild West and freewheeling. Like, for every YouTube, there's now Rumble, which is, huge among the conservatives now. For every Mastodon, and the thing about Mastodon is that Gab was hosted on Mastodon first, and Gab is, a hotbed for white supremacy. So the hard thing is, whatever platform we talk about, there's always going to be bad actors on it now. And I think the hard thing that we're always going to have to be discussing in the future is and this is like a real philosophical debate I get into at work a lot now when it comes to things like AI and AI moderation. It feels like sometimes with tech, you can either have this really kind of walled-in garden where all the rules are set. It's kind of a menagerie. You get to do what you want in the menagerie, but you only get to do what's in the menagerie. Like, there's no, breaking the rules inside of it. Or you kind of have this Wild West, and you really have to decide which one that you want to deal with, because if you're in the menagerie, you're stuck with certain rules, you're stuck with certain strictures. You just have to play the game of being in another person's house, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, Mastodon, whatever. If you go out there to like the decentralized networks or Rumble, you kind of make your own fate with it. I think when it comes to AI moderation, again, and we were kind of having this conversation before the podcast got started, I think it is way too early to tell how certain people are going to use it, and I think it's still such a nascent thing that is still being developed and figured out that it's not going to be perfect. It's going to screw up a lot. So we're going to have to, I think instead of worrying about the kind of content we put out there and the kind of discussion that's being had, we're going to have to worry about these platforms and these tools moderating out discussion that, is actually quite harmless if you actually look at what's being discussed, just because certain keywords or phrases are being used. So that's just going to be a challenge that, we're going to have to get through. And that's also part of what's going to go into the development of AI. We have to go through these period of screw ups and, dress downs and dry runs and trying again and again to make this thing work. And in the meantime, it's just going to suck. But it always sucks. And we're kind of always on the cycle of, man, this thing sucks. Oh, it's great. Oh, this sucks. Oh, it's great. Right now, it kind of feels like it sucks. But I don't know how long that lasts. But, at some point, I think we figure it out. When that happens and how that turns out is, up in the air. But for social media right now, I think if you're a decent person and you're just out there trying to be you and trying to put not the best version of you out there, but just the most authentic version of you out there, as long as you're not a raving asshole about it, I think you'll be fine. But, other people have very, very different experiences trying to be honest and true with their own experiences. And, people are crazy. So, whatever you do is whatever's going to happen. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Rachel?
Oh, yeah. You got to follow up with, now, those that know me, and I think most of this panel does, one would probably argue that I am one of the most Pollyanna milquetoast people on the planet. I have been banned from Twitter. I had to get myself reinstated after deleting because I discussed a beverage called punch.
Oh,
so
gas.
keep that in mind, that R.E. Carr, the person who posts about kittens and bread, got banned by
Talking
AI.
about them street drugs.
I fear for my life, Rachel.
Yes, I know. Rick, are you still afraid of me for my violent hate? It was described as hate speech. The person who worries about every word choice she makes, I'm the one that got banned for hate speech. I did get myself back. So yeah, it does kind of suck. And I hate to say it, if you are not a certain type of person, you get hit a lot harder and a lot more frequently than other people do. I'm not going to start a total rant, but the one thing I've learned about any type of media is that the more broad it is, the more it is going to be morality policed. It's the difference between network TV and HBO. And I think there are places, I think that broad content does deserve some standards of moderation. But the simple fact is, the more people see it, the more chance you got grandma, you got your 6-year-old, you got a total religious person, you got a person who's offended by religion. You have all of these. So when you are ever dealing with mass communication, there is a certain vanillification that happens, and that's just a point. And on the flip side, when you go to complete no moderation, complete Wild West, it usually turns into 16 pages of boob shots, followed by 100 pages of ads for penis enlargement and sunglasses. That's what happens, because if there's no moderation, the flood of crap drowns out anything you would have freely expressed. So there has to be different varieties, and there needs to be a place for all of it. And certainly, if you're talking about all speech, if you had me talking, speech should be free, but it also should consider the audience. You have every right to say whatever the heck you want, but there are always consequences for what you say, and nothing amplifies that like social media. And I do think, I am one of the people that believes that the platforms, they need to have some structure, and they also need to have some freedom from the independent humans that are on it, because if you start taking that away and everything becomes controlled, we get very Big Brother very fast. There has to be some nuance. The opposite of AI moderation. There has to be some nuance and some thinking and some compromise between these things, because, as I said, you've got network TV, you've got late night cable, dear God, what did I watch? And then you've got a sweet spot that might be HBO in the middle for whatever your tastes are. And I think we do have to very deliberately and consciously think, because communication is the most fundamental human thing we have. Our social interaction, we think it's stupid, but the ability to interact, like I said, Twitter has started revolutions and saved people's lives. There is a certain value and protection that needs to be done, and we should consider it carefully and the future of it. And above all, I would like it known that I did not threaten Rick Gualtieri with hate speech on Twitter.
And yet you got banned.
Yet I got banned. So yeah, definitely something to consider.
The first time I got thrown into Facebook jail was because I posted a link to a study based around the rituals and rites used by a number of fraternal organizations in universities that included pictures, and that was enough to get me banned on the Facebooks.
Penguins. I got a slap for a penguin picture.
Oh, that's because they're little bastards.
No, otters are bastards. Penguins are actually way nicer than otters. But that's either there. I'm going to step on James' toes. She needs to comment.
James is the other way too, by the way, just on my screen.
On my
James,
screen,
so
he's
you're
that
up.
way.
You're up next.
Apparently, I'm next. So okay, there are a lot of feelings and a lot of things that I have on here. I will give a little background and say that I am heavily involved right now in the cybersecurity space, in a specific around the AI space. Like, I'm actually headed down to California in March to help run a symposium on the cybersecurity in space issue as it relates to AI, because that's very specific. But I also have a lot of very hands-on experience with this, both from personal experience and from the side of making things safer. I'm going to be using some euphemisms in this discussion because there are groups which should not be named for interests of preventing people from getting targeted. So what I will say is that I was part of the group that early on had to deal with a major outbreak of hate utilizing professional channels from a writers' organization early on that exploded into a major issue moving forward, which has caused many ripples throughout not only the industry, but in fact the world, because they went on and became the dominant party in the US for a while. And yes, I can draw a straight correlation from someone getting mad about an award that they felt they deserved to the political situation of the last few years. So I have very strong opinions about this. And my firm belief is that while there is freedom of speech, there should not be freedom of consequences, and that everyone should be safe to talk online. And what that often gets twisted into is, oh, everyone should be able to say their thing online, when that turns into a certain group of people having a very open forum to abuse another group of people, who then often get punched down on when they attempt to either defend themselves or highlight the issues going on. This is more and more of an issue, in particular as we have AI. And another pet peeve is that it's not actually AI, it's machine learning, and it's very much learning off of existing scripts, which are in and of themselves inherently problematic and biased. So I don't think that right now we can create something that is run by machines that is even remotely, useful or ethical. And so that's a major issue for me going forward, is how do we rectify that? Because there's also a lot of information about the significant damage that is done to human moderators who are trying to moderate social media spaces. People are terrible. And the human cost of moderating a social media space and keeping it safe is unbelievable. But our machine learning is not yet in a place where it can really keep up with that. But this kind of also goes back to a number of years ago, I was in California visiting with a good friend of mine who was very high up in a very large tech company. And we were talking about, and I mean, this was 10 years ago. We were talking about social media, and specifically the issues that are being dealt with, and that the internet took everyone in any position of law creation or enforcement by complete surprise, basically. It was the Wild West, and it's still the Wild West, because no one who is in the position to make these laws really understands how to deal with that. And at the time, we were specifically talking about some of the issues that were going on in video games. And the problem in that this technically is a high-level cross-state crime, but that there's no real communication between local police and larger, like the FBI type groups. No one has any rules around that. So no one wants to get caught up in that because it's going to turn into a slugfest. And we're still in that position. There still are no really good laws. Like swatting is just now something that's starting to get addressed, kind of. And we're seeing that on a major level. I was having a discussion recently with Wes Chu about electric vehicles and the fact that we're getting into these highly AI run vehicles without any discussion about the security around them. We are so far behind on safety and control of these systems that we're building, and tech has no interest in building better systems because it doesn't make money. And I don't know how we're going to get around that. I don't know that there's anyone who has the appropriate level of power and influence who also is ethical about it.
Rick?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said about how much of a dumpster fire, social media is and heading towards. I mean, right now on Facebook, I will get banned if I post an ad that shows cartoonish, obviously fake blood. Yet I can report somebody for like hate speech, and I'll just get back, nope, we didn't find any violation here. And I think a lot of it really comes down to what James was saying about money. For these social media networks, they're open for abuse because they're all about engagement. They want to show those big numbers. And here's the thing: controversy breeds engagement. People breaking the rules, and let's be honest, the bad players learn how to break the rules really quickly. Over on TikTok, it's well known that there's plenty, like you speak out against the wrong people, and a million bots are gonna descend on you and complain enough to get you auto banned. And I don't even think it's the technology like they can't stop. I think the social media, when they get dragged in front of Congress, they pretty much just stand there and lie and be like, "Oh, we're doing our best." They're not doing their best. Controversy, hatred, all of this stuff equals engagement, and that's what they want. So I don't really know how to fight that. For me personally, with regards to things being cracked down, I'm not too worried because I'm a writer. My job is to play with words, so I can I can always modify things. Over on TikTok, you see things like people learn really quickly the words that will and won't get them nailed by AI. So you see people talking in code along the lines of, "Hey, I watched some porn after I unalived somebody playing Yahtzee," and it's pretty obvious what they mean by that. Unfortunately, of course, the bad players also adopt their own code, so it plays both ways. Yeah, it's a massive problem. But at the same time, just taking away those crappy controls that we have just makes it worse because the absolute worst of the worst then come out of the woodwork. And yeah, you wind up with with a parlor that that even that Apple looks and says, "Yeah, you're not staying on our thing because no thanks." So yeah, it is a major issue. I have no idea how to fix that. I mean, the only thing I can I can think of is with those smaller communities, they're self-policing, whereas the larger internet is not. And only thing I can think is it's really just up to those people who are capable of fighting the good fight, to do what they can if they see somebody who's being dogpiled on. I mentioned before, half jokingly, mediocre white guy armor, but yeah, I have jumped into a few of those arguments, and because the deflection doesn't get aimed at me, whereas it will get aimed at others. So yeah, I don't know. It really is a dumpster fire. It's navigating through a sea that is just full of okay, here be monsters, here be monsters, here be monsters, and you have a blindfold on and you're trying to get across it.
Well, since we're kind of coming in on time, I want to make sure that we've dove into a lot of the good and the bad of what we've seen come out of social media over the last 20 something years, and how much change has gone on. And it gives us a lot of options. It gives us a lot of possibility. But also, I think everybody, especially if you're going into this to build your brand, build reputation, you need to be aware of the risks. And, one of the biggest risks we see is the one that says, I change my rules tomorrow, so you're gone. I mean, we've seen people be demonetized, deplatformed, and literally have years and years wiped out in an instant. And there's a ton of things that we could dive into and talk about, from tactics and strategies and things that are going to be, useless in 90 more days. But the one thing I'd like to wrap up here on it, is what is the last, the one thing that we haven't talked about tonight, because there's a ton of topics around this that we could dive into. What's the one thing that you want to make sure that you at least tell somebody who is wanting to really look and understand social media, use it to continue to build, platform their marketing, getting their message out there, for art, creativity, writing, our community, but as we look at and you come in, I also want you to make sure we leave with what's the one thing you also want that person to know to help continue push them along and push them up the road, continue to fight the good fight. So Jay, against my better judgment, I'll let you go first.
So I think the way social media is going to go is going to reflect the changes taking place in the world. I'm a big believer in this kind of author named Peter Zian, who says that we're at the end of globalization. I think he's right. I think you're going to start seeing us as a country pull back. And as we pull back, the way we deal with social media on an international level will change, which is why, and I have some friends in the DoD who actually believe this pretty fervently. There's a good chance that like TikTok one day could be banned if ByteDance doesn't find a way to sell it or separate it from the Chinese Communist Party. Like, that's a really legitimate thing, and it's been banned by government agencies. So like, this is a very serious thing that like content creators and authors should really be taking note of and following, because a lot of these people, especially in terms of book talk, have really built some really solid platforms, and I'm really happy for them to do that. But you should always be worried of the government or the changes in the winds in the world coming and really altering your plans in terms of you have all these small ideas about how you want to market this book or that book or what you want to say on this platform. Something might happen in the world. Someone in the government might make a decision one day, and you don't have those options anymore. The one thing that I do tell people now is that if it comes to social media, like, have a social media, but have a website too. Have a newsletter. Have these things that are, just your base foundation of having a digital presence. And I argue it's more important to have a website and have a newsletter first. Social media channels.
Hang on, sorry, Jay. Can you kind of restart that? I hit the wrong. I was responding to somebody.
Sorry. I'll wrap this up quick. Sorry. So I really tell people that like the important thing going forward with the changing nature of media, especially social media, when it comes to entertainment and government interaction, really like form yourself a good foundation of having a website, having a newsletter, and then worry about your social media channels from there, because you can't predict anything anymore with social media, because just as the world changes, this is going to change too. And Jay made a really important point early on about Twitter. Twitter really was the nexus and the beating heart of an entire media machine, not just social justice and economic justice movements, but the entire like news media itself was kind of on Twitter, and is still kind of on Twitter. So when we see changes in ownership, when we see changes in moderation, these things have really big global impacts all the way down to the local level. So insulate yourself the best you can by having things that you can control directly, like your website, like your newsletter. I'm sorry to repeat those things over and over again, but they're important. But always just, try to be prepared for these changes and go in the I've said tonight, it's hard to do the best you on social media or the worst you, but try to go in there with as much decency as you can and the right mindset that you can survive on there. And you can do it. It's going to suck every so often, but you can do it. That's it. Sorry.
Rachel?
Well, it's really hard to follow that, but if there is one piece of advice, and this is the best piece of advice for anything dealing with social media, if you do nothing else, don't be a dick. That's it. Just don't be a dick online. It will serve you when nothing else does.
The Will Wheaton rule?
Yep. Don't be a dick. And that is actually where I got it, is the Will Wheaton rule. And yeah, I may never be the biggest, most viral sensation, but I also won't get spit upon at Applebee's. And I'm okay with that. Also, I wouldn't be at Applebee's, I'm sorry. But it is what it is.
James?
I mean, there's this mystification almost of going viral. And I have friends who've gone viral and they don't like it. I've gone lightly viral a few times and it's just a bunch of, okay, I'm blocking you, I'm blocking you. Oh, cool, my block list has grown significantly and I've had zero anything come out of it. You are much better off building a slow and steady base of people who are genuinely interested in who you are and what you're doing than in going viral once or twice over something, that may not be related to your books. So if you've been working really hard and you've never gone viral, it's okay. It is not the golden goose of, selling books or being successful. If anything, it just kind of obscures things and makes it harder to build a community out of it. Like Jay said, though, have a website. I don't really do anthology editing anymore, but I cannot tell you how many authors have been on my list to invite, and I go and I look for contact information for them, and I can't find it. I don't want to be messaging you on Facebook about an anthology invitation if I don't know you. It's also hard for me to keep track of, but that's beside the point. And that's been one of my things for years is have an email address where I can find you, please. Like, oh my God, the number of times that I can't find a way to get in contact with someone. And then I hear them talk about, well, I'm not getting any opportunities. There's a reason for that. So make sure that you have a way for people to get in contact with you, but also be aware that social media may not be your thing. Like I have a lot of people who are going off of social media lately. It's hard, but so is social media. So if you just really don't feel safe or you really hate it, that's fine. And the last thing, and I know that I'm kind of running out of the one thing here, sorry. It's not enough to not just be problematic on social media, because you will. Best intentions are amazing, but there will come a time where you trip. I've done it terribly. And the biggest thing that you can do is say, okay, I screwed this up. I didn't mean it, but that doesn't remove the harm that was done. And being able to step back and go, I'm sorry. I will try not to do that again. I will try to learn from that. I will try to do reparations, but there may be people who don't want to be around me again, don't want to risk that. That's okay too. We're not meant to be friends with every single person. It's okay if you have to block someone. It's okay if someone blocks you. Don't get so tied up in the follower count and the connections that it does active damage to your life.
Rick?
All right. Well, everybody's had really good points so far. I'm not going to rehash them because they're all really valid. I agree. I will say my advice is, learn to just keep scrolling. I have taken the mindset of when I'm going through Facebook or Twitter, and sometimes when I see somebody who's just a complete jackass, yeah, I want to tell them they're that. But you know something? Sometimes the worst thing you could do is deprive them of that oxygen. You're not going to change their mind. Yes, there's somebody wrong on the internet. You're not going to fix that. But you know something? You can have a much better day and spare yourself a lot of heartache arguing with somebody if you just look and say, not worth my time.
Swing
Is that
the
why you don't
ban hand.
reply to me?
Not worth my time.
Swing the band hammer with reckless abandon. All right, Jess, bring it home.
Educate yourself. If you're new to all of this, if you're a new author, get in there and educate yourself. Get to meet some of the other authors that maybe you're connected with, who you're publishing with. Make friends with them. Hang out with them. Hey, Rachel. Get to know them. Learn from them, because they've already been where you've been. You're starting at one point in the journey, they're farther in the journey. Learn from their journey. Talk to them. Ask questions. Figure out what they're doing on social media that's working, and try it. It may not work for you. That's okay, because you'll find something that does work for you. And pay attention. And when you see them in real life, ask questions. And if you don't see them in real life, ask questions. And all of these folks who know me know that I ask way too many questions and bug the hell out of them. And I've learned so much, and it's helped so much. So educate yourself, and that's how you're going to figure out which social media works for you and what tactics are going to work for you the best and what's most comfortable for you.
Well, I hope everybody gets a lot out of this evening's conversation. But before we go away and let everybody try to absorb all of tonight's deep thoughts, let's make sure they know where to find you guys and your books. So, Mrs. Carr, websites, social media, and all the good stuff where you're at.
I do have a website. It's racheleccar.com. Darn that person with vegan cookbooks. You can also find me on pretty much any social media as Total Recar. So yes, if you get my handle, you understand all you need to know about my books.
James?
So I am extremely original and hard to find. And if you're on a platform and you look for either James Gates or James.Gates, you can probably find me. I would like to say that this is a brilliant branding choice on my part, but I have dyslexia and ADHD, so it's really just so that I can keep track of myself and find myself again. I am somewhat active on Twitter, mostly complaining about various technological issues, and I'm pretty active on Facebook, and I have a badly unupdated site.
Rick?
You can find me pretty much anywhere I am, just as Rick Gualtieri, including my website, rickgualtieri.com, which also links to all my social media. If you can't spell it, my recommendation is go to Google and Google Bill the Vampire, which is my my top seller, and that will take you to something that is probably connected to me.
Jess?
You can find me at Jessica Nettles Author. .com. You can find me on Facebook, Jessica Nettles. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter, Steampunk English. I'm on Mastodon, but you probably can't find me because nobody can find anybody on Mastodon.
No, they can't.
They really can't. But you can find. I probably have the most interesting stuff on Instagram because pictures of my cats. What's not to love, right? Come see me. You can find me on Amazon if you want to buy my book, Children of Menlo Park. Please buy my book. I would love that. The closer we get to selling 1,500 more books, the closer I get to an audiobook. I would love that. Thank you.
Jay?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jay Reckwider, an author of epic fantasy and sword and sorcery, also urban fantasy. You can find me at jreckwider.com. Is that backwards? That probably is backwards.
No, you're fine.
Perfect.
You can find it at jreckwider.com or on Twitter at jreckwider, but you can also find me with my name on all the other platforms. So I'll see you there. Maybe, maybe not. You do you.
And I've had the pleasure of trying to wrangle this group this evening. Your host, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, speculativefictionacademy.com, ratingpros.com, and of course, here at ConTinual. And keep in mind, everything you do on social media, do it with intention and hope for the best. We'll see you guys again next week.